Financing property. Who can finance a real estate transaction? Well, a real estate transaction could be financed by any bank, any financial entity, or even by the seller. It all depends also on the buyer and the seller and how they agree upon. Let's talk first about Costa Rican banks. Costa Rican banks, I will say that as any other bank worldwide, it's quite difficult. I mean, they will ask for several requirements. So, as in any other country, it's easier for Costa Ricans to get financing than for foreigners. Same thing as a Costa Rican goes to the US and try to get a financing for buying a property. Same thing. Why is it so difficult? Well, it's difficult for Costa Ricans first because it's not only about the guarantee or the collateral that is going to be given. It's also about, could they pay? Does they have the ability to pay? Banks are not interested on keeping a lot of real estate. They are just interested on getting their interests and get paid back. That's it. So for Costa Ricans, it's difficult. I'm not saying impossible, I'm just saying it's difficult. Whole process needs to take in order to get financing. So for foreigners, I will lie if I say that it's impossible, but very difficult, much more difficult. Why? Because they are not living here, because they are not having a running business, but because they could not prove that they could pay. Now, it's not the same if it is a foreigner that wants to buy a second home here than if it is a foreigner that has already been living in Costa Rica for 10 years and is a resident of Costa Rica and has a running business. Totally different. So it's not that foreigners cannot buy, it's just that by getting a loan from a bank, it's just that it's a little bit more difficult for foreigners than for Costa Ricans. And obviously, this happened also with any other financial entity, not necessarily a bank, but what we call a financiera, that they just finance people. Well, they will ask pretty much for the same requirements. But it's not only because of the bank. It's also because of what we've been calling SUGEF, the General Superintendents of Financial Entities. There are rules and regulations to whom you can lend money, how to do it. You need to check that they could pay. And it's not only about collateral. Now, could a foreigner entity or bank finance a real estate transaction in Costa Rica? Of course. The problem is for that entity. The problem is for that bank. How are they going to mortgage the property? How are they going to work? That's their problem. But they could do it. So yes, I have had cases in which an entity out of Germany and another one out of Luxembourg have already financed projects and real estate transactions here. But they have their own way of guaranteeing this transaction and not necessarily with the asset here in Costa Rica. So, yes, banks will finance. Yes, financial entities will finance, but very difficult for the foreigners. Now, could the seller finance? Sure. The seller could say, okay, give me 50%, just to say a percentage, or give me 40%, and I will finance the rest under these terms. A, B, and C. X amount of years, only paying interest, then a balloon payment, or payments every month, they could agree upon. And that is much more easier than getting a financing from a bank. Now, the question is, how is the person or entity that is financing, how is going to be guaranteed that the loan is going to get paid? Well, we have this word in English, mortgage. If we translate the word mortgage into Spanish, will be hipoteca. But a mortgage and an hipoteca are not exactly the same. The mortgage in English is pretty much bigger in the sense that will be anything that will guarantee the transaction that we're talking about. The hipoteca, it's a kind of lien that is written down in the public registry in Costa Rica. The mortgage could be an hipoteca, but could be any other kind of guarantee that involves this. Now, if we go into an hipoteca, this is registered at the public registry, okay? And if the person that needs to pay will not do it or will not comply with what the contract says, and there is some sort of default, then the mortgage holder would need to go to court. Definitely go to court in a special process that is called Proceso Monitorio Hipotecario. That's in Spanish, and I need to say it in Spanish because there is no translation. But it's in a special process. And the problem is that according to our law, the person that have default needs to be served. And if it is a foreigner, it's quite easy that they just leave the country. And in order to continue the process, needs to be served. So now I need to go to wherever in order to serve this person of the process before a foreclosure, before it could be foreclosed. So it's a problem. Having an hipoteca, mortgage hipoteca, if the person might leave the country, and then it will be a little bit more difficult to serve the lawsuit. If it is between Costa Ricans, it's a little bit easier to be done. Now, of course, there is a process. One has been served. There will be a foreclosure process within that. That is called an auction. There will be 3 auctions, and someone could just buy the property, or whoever has been financing could get the property back as payment of the amount that is owed. And the mortgage will be released also from the public registry. Now, if there is a mortgage, as I'm saying, mortgage dash hipoteca, and it's paid, it's important for you to know that because it's registered at the public registry, needs to be released from the public registry, even though it's paid. So that needs to be done also in front of a notary. A notary needs to do this, which is the person that have financed the property, say, I've been paid and I release the mortgage. And that needs also to be registered at the public registry. So because of these problems of serving the person if they don't pay, now banks, financial entities, sellers are using what is called a guarantee trust. Now, in order to explain a guarantee trust, and quite fast I'm going to explain what a trust is. And a trust will have pretty much 3 different parties. A, that will put an asset in a trust, and I will describe the trust. Let's put it like a kind of bag here. This person, which is the trustee, is just holding the bag, taking care of the bag. But it's not the owner of the bag, okay? It's just the one that is taking care of that. So Mr. A here will put this house into the bag. Okay? And now, with the specific instructions between them, this is a contract, and this contract, it's called, in English, trust, in Spanish, fideicomiso. With this contract, okay, this person will receive a specific instruction from this person as what to do with this asset, and when and to whom this asset needs to be given. So, there are very different kind of trusts. For example, and I could put into a trust whatever I want. Properties, cars, shares, money, you name it, okay? So, I could say, I'm going to put this house into a trust, the house, and it's registered at the public registry, owned by the trustee in trust. Okay, see what I'm saying? Owned by the trustee in trust, which means it's not part of my patrimony. It's a separate patrimony. I'm just owning this in a trust with specific instructions of what to do. I might need to administrate this or not. Just keep it in trust. And this person could say, well, when I pass away, you need to give this to my 2 kids. Just to give an example. So, no probation processes. No taxes need to be paid more than the transfer from here to here. And I don't need a will and last testament. I don't need a corporation. I need nothing. This is just an example of a trust. This is called an heritage trust. I could have an administrative trust. This person puts in a trust some apartments, and I will administrate the apartments, and after 30 years or 10 years, I need to give these apartments back to A, B, or C. Well, there is also one called a guarantee trust, which means that A purchased from B. Okay, so B is the seller. Now A will buy, but because the bank is financing or the seller is financing, the property is not going to go into A, but into a trust with the specific instructions that if A does not pay, the trustee needs to go into a foreclosure process. It's a kind of auction for 3 times in order to sell the property. In which way the buyer could pay and get back the property, or the seller at the end could get the property, or a third party could pay, get the property, and the seller will get paid. The good part of a trust is that it's much faster than a bank, and no proceso monitorio at court is needed. So the trustee will do everything. So it's very, I will not say easy, but very fast to be done. So this, with a guarantee trust, is another way of financing and having a good guarantee that will get paid or will get the property back. I want to add here that the trusts are also a way of estate planning, and it's a little bit what we were talking. If someone purchased, for example, with a corporation, the corporation could transfer eventually the land into a trust in order to protect the kids or whoever you want to inherit, or you can transfer only the shares into a trust and keep the company. If you sell eventually, then you will just dissolve the trust. But if you do not sell, then the shares, in case of death, if someone passes away, the shares will go to the kids. So just trying to go fast on this, estate planning is done between 2 different things: corporations and trusts, and the combination of corporation and trust. Which takes me to a very last question that someone have done. Who can foreclose and how? Well, I have already answered 2/3 of that question. Who can foreclose? Well, anyone that has a mortgage-hipoteca under a proceso monitorio. But if there are some other debts, for example, and the judge accepts this, and the judge accepts to put a lien in the property, well, there will be another process at court, and this person eventually could foreclose. If the property is under a trust, an auction could take place under a foreclosure process. And of course, if there is any death of the person that owns the land, because of the land or because of personal things, a lien could be put in the property and a foreclosure could take place. So, if I owe money to Mr. X because I wrote a note for him and I'm not paying, well, that note could be taken into court and eventually a lien is going to be written down at the public registry on this property and will be foreclosed. If taxes are owed, well, the city hall could have also put a lien in the property through a process at court and foreclose. And finally, if you are not paying the condominium fees, the maintenance fees in a condominium, also the administrator could go into a process and foreclose. So there are several different ways in which or reasons because a property could be foreclosed. So just to finish this, it's important also for everybody to be clear that owning the real estate in Costa Rica could be done under the family name, under the corporation, but also you have this trust option. And what is most important is that you can plan your estate and use everything. You know, have things under your family name, have trust, have corporations, and a combination of all this. But this is obviously something that needs to be decided case by case. Thank you.